Hello, thank you for joining us. Tonight, just 6 weeks into his second term, President Trump will address a joint session of Congress. But even before he enters the House chamber, the president's agenda is making waves here at home and overseas. As of today, the U.S. is collecting a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico. President Trump also doubled the existing tariff on imports from China, raising it to 20%. Canada and China have already retaliated. Mexico says it will take action Sunday. The White House has said the tariffs are in response to fentanyl coming from Mexico and Canada, although less than 1% of fentanyl seized in the U.S. comes from the north. During an interview today, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick suggested there could be an agreement in the works.
Both the Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today, trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way.
We are also following changes to U.S. policy with Ukraine. President Trump has paused all military aid to the country after his heated exchange with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office last week. We'll have more on all of that this hour, but first, we are just 3 hours away from the president's address. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez joins us now. Nancy, a lot has happened in just 6 weeks, from tariffs to DOGE cuts to an immigration crackdown. Given all of that and what's to come, how is the president approaching tonight's address?
Well, he wants to make the case, Lindsay, that he has gotten a lot done just in the past 6 weeks, and to make an argument for what he wants to accomplish over the next 4 years. The overarching theme is the renewal of the American dream. He's going to argue that he is the one to do it and that all of his policies are aimed at accomplishing that. There are a lot of questions about some of the things that he has accomplished over the past 6 weeks. The cuts to government, the cuts to the government workforce that has at times seemed arbitrary, haphazard. Judges have put in pauses. At times, the DOGE operation itself has rolled those cuts back. He's not going to necessarily talk a lot about some of the criticism that he's received about that. Certainly not the criticism that he's received about these tariffs. He's going to argue instead that in the long run, all of these things are going to benefit the American people. In the long run, it will be better for America to have a smaller government and to have, these trade implications that we are seeing right now on day one of the new tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So
good in the long run could be something also that applies in the administration's eyes to tariffs, because the president has said they may bring Americans some pain. We know Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said today there's going to be a transition period. How is the administration responding?
Well, you pointed out that the Commerce Secretary is already saying that perhaps these tariffs will be short-lived, that perhaps the president is already engaged in some backroom dealings with Canada and Mexico that would enable these tariffs to be halted. If that happens, it's going to be very interesting to see what he got in exchange for a one-day tariff and whether it is worth the massive slide that we saw in the U.S. stock market as a result of these tariffs being put in place. I'm not sure that the administration anticipated the kind of blowback that they got. Even some Republicans on Capitol Hill today, when asked point blank whether they said this is a good idea, if this is a good idea, they wouldn't back the policy. They simply said, well, it's what the president is doing, and I want to give him some latitude to do it. So some discomfort from Republicans, outright derision from Democrats. Let's see how far the president goes in making the case for the tariffs tonight.
What is the latest between the rare minerals deal between the U.S. and Ukraine?
So it sounds like it is less dead than it seemed 24 hours ago. What's that phrase from Princess Bride? Mostly dead. It sounds like maybe the minerals deal was just mostly dead, because now it is a topic of conversation once again. Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, posted today that he wants to get back to work on the deal. So the question is, Does President Trump have an appetite to re-engage, and does he think that what Zelensky said is enough to kind of soothe some of the hurt feelings on both sides after the dust-up in the Oval Office last week, whether President Trump is willing to go back to the table?
Nancy Cortez, thank you so much. CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion joins us now. Nikole, some Democrats are planning to boycott tonight's address. Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin will deliver the Democratic rebuttal. What do we know about her, and what can we expect to hear?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, obviously we don't expect all Democrats to attend, but certainly many are, and they're trying to use this as an opportunity to bring guests who are impacted by some of the cuts that the Trump administration has made. So from that standpoint, we will see a significant amount of Democrats in the chamber tonight. But as you pointed out, Michigan's Elissa Slotkin will be delivering that Democratic rebuttal. She is a freshman senator, and really part of the reason that she was picked, of course, is that she won a very tight contest in a swing state, a state that was not only important in the last election as a key battleground, the state of Michigan, but also will continue to be a significant state going forward in terms of being yet another critical battleground in 2026. Her counterpart, Gary Peters, has announced that he's not running. So, of course, that carries a lot of significance for Democrats, especially as they try to get their game plan and strategy back together for the upcoming midterms. But also, more significantly, especially given the tariff announcement by the president, this gives her an opportunity to respond to that, being a state that borders Canada, to talk about the potential downsides of imposing tariffs that the president is doing on Canada, Mexico, and other countries, but also to, by and large, just like her Democratic colleagues, will be bringing guests to kind of reflect the impact of the president's agenda. She, too, will be kind of rebutting some of these other efforts by the president, whether it's the DOGE cuts, or whether it's the strategy that he's taken to address the border. This will give her an opportunity to try to address all of these changes that we have seen en masse in her address tonight.
Earlier today, NRSC Chair Richard Hudson, who runs the campaign arm for House Republicans, encouraged members not to hold in-person town halls. Are these moments at town halls becoming a real concern for Republicans?
Well, look, I mean, it's not necessarily great optics when you have these town halls, in some instances, devolving into, shouting matches, if you will. But they are designed for constituents to express their concerns. In terms of Congressman Hudson, what he shared with some reporters is that, yes, he did advise some members not to hold these in-person town halls because he feels that they have now become a target of Democrats to, use it as an opportunity to make Republicans look bad, if you will. So he advised, it might be better to do more of these virtual teletown halls, if you will.
Is there evidence of that, Nikole? Is it evidence that it's strictly Democratic people who are in these town halls complaining?
Well, I think we have seen a cross-section. I mean, there obviously have been many town halls that have occurred over the last couple of weeks, so it's unclear in each and every one of them if they're stacked with Democrats, but certainly there have been some that are not, that have represented a cross-section of people, if you will. So from that standpoint, I think the main message that we are hearing from House Republicans on this front is that, yes, we want you to continue to meet with your constituents, but let's try to do it in a way that doesn't try to draw negative attention or opposing attention to some of these issues, even though they are issues that certainly many Republican lawmakers are starting to take to heart.
Nikole Killion, thank you so much. And CBS News 24/7 will be live as President Trump addresses a joint session of Congress tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. Special coverage anchored by Major Garrett begins at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by a primetime special hosted by John Dickerson, Maurice Dubois, and Margaret Brennan at 9 p.m. Watch all of that on CBS and Paramount Plus.